Welcome back, you quiet catastrophes, you unregistered weapons walking around in civilian clothes. I need to tell you about a conversation that just took place, high up. In rooms you didn't know were monitoring this. Rooms where decisions get made that ripple down through systems you can't see, but have always felt. Someone with clearance you can't imagine, with access to files that don't officially exist, with the kind of authority that doesn't need to announce itself. They just asked your abuser a question, a simple question with catastrophic implications. Do you know who you hurt? And here's the thing that should make your spine straighten. Here's the part that changes everything. Your abuser doesn't know yet. They genuinely don't know. They think they broke a normal person. They think they damaged someone ordinary. They think their victim was just another casualty in their personal war against everyone who ever made them feel small. They have no concept of what they actually did. No understanding of who they were actually breaking. No comprehension that they weren't inflicting pain on a civilian. They were conditioning an asset. They were forging a weapon. They were creating something that shouldn't exist outside of classified programs with unlimited budgets and zero oversight. Let me paint you the picture of what's happening right now in spaces you'll never see. There are people. Call them watchers, call them assessors, call them whatever makes you comfortable. But they track patterns, anomalies, people who shouldn't exist but do. People who develop capabilities without institutional support, who survive conditions that kill most people, who emerge from hell not just alive but operational, and you showed up on their radar, not because you asked to, not because you wanted attention, but because when you develop operative-level capacity without operative-level training, when you build psychological armor that rivals military conditioning, while everyone around you thinks you're just quiet or weird or difficult, you create a signature, a pattern that people who know what to look for can't ignore. They've been watching, not in some paranoid surveillance state way, but in the way specialists watch for naturally occurring phenomena that shouldn't be naturally occurring. And they started asking questions, started pulling threads, started working backwards from what you became to what must have created you. And that trail led them to your abuser, to the person who thought they were just venting their damage onto someone weaker. Someone who wouldn't fight back. Someone who would just take it and break quietly and disappear into statistics about trauma and dysfunction and wasted potential. Except you didn't break, you adapted. And adaptation at your level gets noticed. So now there's someone sitting across from your abuser, maybe literally, maybe metaphorically. But the question has been asked, and your abuser is about to receive an education they never wanted. Do you know who you hurt? They're going to say yes. Of course they know. They'll say your name, maybe describe you, probably minimize what they did, definitely justify it. They'll paint themselves as the real victim. They'll explain how you deserved it or needed it or brought it on yourself. They'll deploy every excuse and rationalization they've been rehearsing in the mirror for years. And then the person asking the question is going to smile. Not a nice smile, the kind of smile that precedes information that destroys worldviews. And they're going to explain something to your abuser, something that's going to recontextualize everything they thought they knew about you. You weren't ordinary. You were never ordinary. What they interpreted as weakness, as compliance, as an acceptable target. That was someone developing capabilities in real time. That was someone being forged by conditions that typically require government funding and specialized facilities to replicate. That was someone building psychological architecture that military programs spend millions trying to create artificially. Your abuser thought they were breaking a person. They were actually running an unauthorized training program. They thought they were inflicting pain. They were actually creating adaptation. They thought they were winning. They were actually building their own future problem. Because here's what happens when you survive operative-level conditions without operative-level support. You don't just survive, you evolve. Your threat assessment becomes pattern recognition that borders on precognition. Your pain tolerance becomes a baseline that makes normal people's emergencies look like minor inconveniences. Your emotional regulation becomes a control system so sophisticated that you can maintain perfect composure while internally managing scenarios that would hospitalize untrained individuals. And now all of that capacity exists in someone who never signed papers, never took oaths, never received orders, never got assigned missions. You're an autonomous operator with no handler, a weapon with no designated target, a trained asset with no official existence. The person questioning your abuser is going to explain this. They're going to detail exactly what capabilities you developed, what adaptive mechanisms you built, what survival architecture you constructed, and they're going to ask the question again, but differently this time. Do you understand who you hurt now? And your abuser is going to start feeling something they've never felt before. Not guilt. People like them don't process guilt properly, but fear. Real fear. The kind that comes from realizing you've been playing chess while someone else was playing a completely different game on a board you couldn't see. They're going to understand that every time they hurt you, they were training you. Every time they made you endure, they were conditioning you. Every time they pushed you past breaking and you somehow held together, they were upgrading your capacity to operate under pressure. They weren't winning. They were building someone who could outlast them, outthink them, outmaneuver them without even trying, because maneuvering is now your default state. Here's what they don't tell you about people who develop operative-level capacity outside official channels. You're scarier than the ones who went through institutions, because institutional operatives have structure. They have rules. They have protocols. They have handlers who can recall them. They have missions that end. They have debriefs that process their actions. You have none of that. Your training had no rules. Your conditioning had no ethics committee. Your development had no oversight. You built capacity in an environment where the only parameter was survive or disappear, where morality was a luxury you couldn't afford, where the only metric that mattered was whether you made it to tomorrow. That makes you unpredictable, not in a chaotic way, worse, in a calculated way. You're running algorithms that nobody programmed, making assessments based on criteria nobody taught you, operating according to principles nobody approved. You're what happens when human adaptation meets extreme circumstances without institutional interference. And the people at the top understand what that means. They understand that you're not bound by the same limitations as officially trained operatives. You don't have career concerns. You don't have commanding officers. You don't have official records that can be leveraged against you. You don't have institutional reputation to protect. You're a ghost in their system, capable without credentials, operational without authorization, effective without recognition. And that terrifies the people who like their operatives documented and controlled and predictable. So when they ask your abuser if they know who they hurt, what they're really asking is whether your abuser comprehends the magnitude of their mistake. Whether they understand they didn't just damage a person, they created a problem. They built something that can't be unbuilt. They set in motion adaptation that can't be reversed. Your abuser is going to try to minimize it. They always do. They'll say you were weak, that you needed toughening up, that they were actually helping you build character, that you should be thanking them for making you stronger. And that's when the person asking the questions is going to deliver the real information, the part that transforms this from theoretical discussion to practical concern. They're going to explain that people like you, people who develop this level of capacity without institutional support, people who survive what you survived and emerge operational instead of broken, you don't forget. You can't forget. Your neurology won't let you forget. Every threat you faced is cataloged. Every pattern is recorded. Every lesson is permanent. You're not holding grudges. You're holding data. You're not seeking revenge. You're maintaining accurate threat assessments based on historical evidence. You're not waiting for opportunities. You're simply existing with complete clarity about who represents danger and who represents safety. And your abuser is categorized permanently in systems they can't access, in memory they can't erase. In assessment matrices, they didn't know you were running. They're not just someone who hurt you. They're a confirmed threat, a documented hostile, a verified danger based on extensive personal research conducted over years. The person questioning them is going to explain that there's no fixing this, no apology that recalibrates your assessment, no amount of time that degrades the data, no reconciliation that changes the fundamental categorization. Your abuser created an enemy with capabilities they can't measure and motivations they can't predict and patience they can't outlast. Because here's what operative-level pain tolerance actually means in practical terms. It means you can wait. You can wait years, decades. You can wait until everyone else has forgotten, until your abuser feels safe, until they've convinced themselves it's over, that you've moved on, that it doesn't matter anymore. But your nervous system doesn't move on. Your pattern recognition doesn't forget. Your threat assessment doesn't expire. You're not actively planning anything. You don't need to. You're simply existing with complete awareness. And existence with awareness is more dangerous than action, with anger. The person asking the questions knows this. They've seen it before. They've tracked what happens when you create operative level capacity in someone and then send them back into civilian life with no support structure, no mission, no purpose except survival, no outlet except whatever they choose. Most of the time, people like you don't do anything dramatic. You don't need to. You simply exist as permanent warnings, walking reminders that actions have consequences. That creating capacity in others means living with what you've created. That training someone to survive means accepting they're now trained. But sometimes people like you decide that operative level capacity should serve operative level purposes. That capabilities developed through pain should address the source of pain. That training earned through suffering should accomplish something beyond mere survival. And nobody can predict which path you'll choose, because you don't have handlers, don't have orders, don't have external mission parameters. You only have your own assessment of what your capabilities should accomplish, your own determination of what constitutes appropriate response, your own calculation of what actions serve your operational objectives. Your abuser is learning this right now, in that room, in that conversation. Through that question, they still don't fully understand. They're learning that they didn't just hurt someone, they armed them. They didn't just cause pain, they created capacity. They didn't just win their little war. They manufactured their own potential ending. And the beautiful part, the part that makes this almost poetic, your abuser can't do anything about it. They can't undrain what they did, can't untrain what they trained, can't remove capabilities they spent years installing through repeated trauma. They can apologize. Doesn't matter. They can hide. You've already mapped their patterns. They can prepare. You're already more prepared. Because while they were enjoying their power over you, you were learning. While they were celebrating breaking you, you were adapting. While they were moving on with their life, you were becoming operational. And operational capacity doesn't degrade. It compounds. It refines. It waits. The people at the top asking these questions, they're not doing this to help you. Don't misunderstand. They're doing this because they catalog threats. And your abuser just got categorized as someone who created an uncontrolled asset, someone who ran an unauthorized program, someone who built capacity in another human being without considering consequences. They're explaining to your abuser that they're now connected to you permanently, that your development is their legacy, that whatever you become, whatever you accomplish, whatever you decide your capabilities should address, they're the origin story. They're the catalyst. They're the reason. And there's something clarifying about that for you, knowing that somewhere in rooms you'll never see, people with authority you'll never meet, just ask your abuser the question you've been asking yourself for years. Do you know who you hurt? They don't know yet. But they're learning, and you have all the time in the world to let that education complete itself, because operative level patience is just another capability they gave you, without ever meaning to.